ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining PEMEA's third webinar entitled Designing Student-Centered Assessment in Flexible Learning. Before we start, may I invite everyone to bow our heads and in the silence of our hearts, let us pray. God of all creation, we, a community of educators and administrators, bow down before you today as we gather together in this PEMEA webinar. Grant us the grace to see your goodness and love for all humanity amid the current public health crisis that the whole world is facing in the history of mankind. Grant us wisdom to learn what is essential, particularly in our field of education, especially education for our young people who are among the affected members of our society. Guide us today as we learn from our resource persons, Dr. Marilyn and Dr. Cha, and bless them more as they impart to us their expertise so we can continue to serve and fulfill our mission in education. Bless also the people behind this webinar who work together to make this event possible for us. All this we pray in the mighty name of our God, His Son Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, so hello again, dear partners in education. Magandang umaga po muli sa inyong lahat. I am Dr. Belen Chu, or Mother Belen for short, and I'm the current treasurer of the PEMEA Board of Trustees, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar session. At this point in time, let me introduce to you an exceptionally talented, cool, and reliable wizard, not only in technology, but also in the field of teaching. She is no less than Dr. Christine Joy A. Balyada to give us the opening message. Dr. Christine Joy Balyada, or Dr. Tin as we fondly call her, is currently the Vice President of the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association, or otherwise called as PEMEA. She is also at present the Vice Chair and an Assistant Professor at the Counseling and Educational Psychology Department of the DLSU Manila. She teaches graduate courses in statistics, assessment, learner-centered teaching and research. She is the course coordinator of the Lasallian Studies and the director of the Operation Big Brother program, and adopt a school community engagement program of the College of Education in the same university. She obtained both her MS in Educational Measurement and Evaluation and PhD degree in Educational Psychology at the De La Salle University, Manila. So, dear friends, let us all give a virtual warm of applause to Dr. Tin. Dr. Tin?
Good morning, and thank you, Doc Belen. Thank you for a very warm introduction, a very kind introduction. So good morning, PEMEA members and friends. Thank you for spending your Friday morning with us in this webinar. We know that there are many webinars happening now, but you chose to listen to our PEMEA webinar today. We hope that your investment of your time and presence will be fruitful. If you have attended our previous webinars, you probably already know that the Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association, or PEMEA, is the only professional organization in the country that focuses on educational assessment, measurement, and program evaluation. We are a professional organization composed of educators, assessment and evaluation experts, and researchers. We have been active since 2008, and some of you have probably attended our conferences and seminar workshops on topics like test development, assessment, program evaluation, statistics, and research. Most of us in PEMEA are educators, and we understand how challenging it will be to teach in this new normal. Some of those challenges are relatable or related to technology and equipment, such as lack of devices for online teaching, unstable internet connection, and lack of access to software that will facilitate the learning process. However, the more pressing challenge for many of us is our lack of experience and expertise in teaching online, and the uncertainty and anxiety that come with being in unfamiliar territory. Through our webinars, we hope that we will help demystify the process of online learning and assessment and give you the confidence to explore new ways of teaching and assessing students online. As we transition to online learning, or what others call emergency remote teaching, let's not forget the reason why we are all doing this, why we are scrambling to learn new technologies, why we sit through several hours of webinars. We are all here because we care about our students. We care about their learning. We care about their well-being. Thus, this webinar today is very timely because it focuses on the design of student-centered assessments. We hope that we will not forget to put our students in the center of the learning process. Our speakers, Dr. Richard Gonzales and Dr. Marilyn Balagtas, are our founding president and current president, respectively. Their combined experience and expertise in assessment, measurement, and evaluation will be a rich source of knowledge for all of us this morning. We hope that you are mentally and emotionally ready to learn a lot today. More than just receiving a webinar certificate of attendance, we sincerely hope that you will gain new knowledge and skills that will benefit your teaching practice and, in turn, the students entrusted to your care. I welcome you all to our webinar on designing student-centered assessment in flexible learning. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you so much, Doc Tin, for your very enlightening and inspiring opening message. So now, may I take the pleasure to announce to everyone that this webinar is brought to you by the Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association, or the popularly known as PEMEA. And similarly, this is also brought to you by Amicus Koi Solutions, the official partner of PEMEA and provider of MS Office 365. We would also like to thank our sponsors, Rex Bookstore and the Association of Local Colleges and Universities, Region 3. Maraming salamat po. Of course, without your support, this webinar could have not been made possible. Let me also run through some tips and guidelines for our very fruitful webinar session. First, please check your internet connection. We advise you to close all your apps that could interfere with the connection speed. Stay focused and avoid multitasking. You may start jotting down notes. Engage and participate, especially during the Q&A portion. And lastly, please provide feedback. For our reminders, please bear in mind the following. Only those who will submit the evaluation forms will be provided with an e-certificate of attendance. The evaluation form is accessible through the link that is flashed on your screen. Remember that the link is case sensitive. The certificate will be sent to your email a few weeks after the webinar. Please provide us with a correct email address. In the event that the secretariat failed to send you the e-certificate after 3 weeks, please do not hesitate to email PEMEA@gmail.com. Okay, so a lot has been said. Hence, at this point in time, let me do the pleasure of introducing to you our two equally brilliant, versatile, and well-esteemed resource speakers. Let's start with Dr. Richard Gonzales. Dr. Richard Gonzales, as Doc Tin has mentioned earlier, is the founding president and chair of the Board of Trustees of PEMEA, which was organized back in 2008. Prior to his return to the Philippines, here in this country, from his stint abroad, luckily before the lockdown, Dr. Cha, as he's fondly called, served the World Bank's education global practice at the Middle East and North Africa region, with his base in Kuwait as a senior education specialist. He provided technical advice on the development and implementation of the measurement and evaluation of student achievement, or the so-called MESA, the National Learning Assessment Program of the State of Kuwait and that of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Dr. Richard is a registered psychometrician, a fellow of the Psychological Association of the Philippines, where he served as the vice president and member of the board of directors. Previously, he was the university registrar and an associate professor of psychology at the DLSU Manila. He also taught at the University of Santo Tomas, and as a professional lecturer, he handled psychological testing, measurement, and evaluation, and statistics, both at the graduate and undergrad programs of the university. Well, at present, Dr. Cha is the founder and the CEO of Inotech, a company he himself owns and established here in the Philippines. Our next speaker, to team with Dr. Cha, is a very amiable, smart, workaholic, and a resourceful educational leader in the person of Dr. Marilyn U. Balagtas. Dr. Marilyn is a university professor at the PMU, or the Philippine Normal University, teaching courses on educational assessment, evaluation, and research from undergrad to doctoral level in both face-to-face and online modality. She has been a dean of PNU College of Flexible Learning and EPNU. She finished her Doctor of Philosophy with a specialization in research and evaluation at the University of the Philippines. She has been awarded a postdoctoral fellowship for leadership in research by the University of New England, Australia, for her projects as the inaugural director of the Philippine National Research Center for Teacher Quality, or the RCTQ, which has led to the development of the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers, or the so-called PPST. Dr. Marilyn is also the founding president of the Philippine Association of Teachers of Educational Foundations and the United Professionals for the Development and Advancement of Teacher Education Incorporated, and she is a member of the American Educational Researchers Association, International Association for Educational Assessment, the National Council for Measurement in Education, and the National Research Council of the Philippines. She is currently the our president, and chair of the Board of Trustees of our association, PEMEA. May I now have the honor to turn you over to our first speaker, Dr. Marilyn Balagtas. Take it away, Doc Marilyn.
Thank you, Mother Bell. Let me just check. Good morning to everyone. Oops, sorry. So to all our participants, welcome to our third webinar. So today's webinar focuses on designing a student-centered assessment in flexible learning. And we structured our session such that it has three parts. First is the part that I'm going to lead first, and this is a discussion on the concepts, principles, and processes in designing a student-centered assessment. Then later on, Dr. Gonzales will follow to focus on performance-based assessment, how to design a student-centered performance-based assessment. Then I will come again in the third part to focus on portfolio assessment as another approach in assessing a student-centered way of assessing learning. Again, I welcome you all and thank you so much for patronizing PEMEA's webinars. Now, just to give guidance on how we should plan our session, we started by thinking on what we want our participants to achieve after listening or tuning in to our webinar. And so we set our target. And this is what we thought we should aim for if we were in your position. That is for you to be able to plan a student-centered assessment in a flexible learning. Now, because assessment could be at any point in instruction, it could happen before instruction, during, and even after. Of course, we know it's always there after instruction. We want to model how it can be done in all the phases of instruction. So, if you don't mind, I want to know first what your prior knowledge is when we talk of student-centered assessment, and of course, the idea of flexible learning. And for you to be able to participate in this exercise, I would like you to get your camera if you have a camera and you have a QR enabled in your camera. Scan this QR code that you could see here, or you could access the form that I prepared. This is an online form using MS Form. And try to click this link here. Okay, so please try to access this. You have two ways to access this. You can just scan it using your camera or whatever you are using, iPad probably, or Android, whatever that is. Use the scan, the QR code as one way, or this tiny URL. If you click this, I think our facilitators are also assisting by putting the link in our Q&A box so that you could link directly in the Q&A part. Okay, so let's try. If you click this, you'll see the online form. So it should look like this. I need to integrate the form in my PowerPoint so that this could become more interactive, because in my PowerPoint, of course, you cannot enter your responses to my assessment. So this is an assessment for you and not for me. So I want you to have a quick reflection on the items here for me to understand where you are when it comes to designing student-centered assessment. So what you have to do, this is a multiple choice format, so it must be easy for you to respond. You just have to click the option that reflects what your prior knowledge is when it comes to, or existing knowledge, when it comes to student-centered assessment. So click one in every set of choices. I want you to also know that if ever you could not see an option from the first three that I put here, A to C, you can offer your own response. However, in our platform of engaging you, the only way for us to know what your responses are is through the Q&A box. And unfortunately, I could only read your response when I'm done with my presentation, because when you do the presentation and it is in slide view format, you cannot see all other applications or all other features of the platform. So I could be able to see your views later on. But anyway, this is not graded. So maybe you could just choose from A to C. Okay, and there are only 5 items here. Have a quick response. And after answering all the 5 questions, kindly submit your response. Okay, I hope you were able to access the form. Now try to submit, and I want to find out if you participated. I'll give you 1 minute probably to answer that. Now let's just make sure that once you have submitted your response to the 5 questions, you should be able to get a feedback from us, from the assessor, from the one who designed the assessment. And the feedback should be able to explain to you your choice. If I don't agree with your choice, then that's fine, because probably your understanding is different from my understanding. But I explained to you the reason why I agree or disagree to whatever choice you have chosen. So I put explanations if I don't agree with A, B, or if I agreed with you for C and D, and so on. So that's how I designed the instrument, so that you could easily get feedback from me, that even if I'm not there or I'm busy, once you access the form and you have submitted your response, you get an automatic response and feedback as to how you responded to the items. Now, I want you to appreciate the beauty of online forms. So let me click this part. Oops. Okay. Okay. So if you have access to forms, then you should be able to see a different format. So what you were able to access a while ago is the view of the assessment to the students. But if you are the designer of the assessment tool, you would be able to see the responses. So look at this, it's increasing. A while ago when I click this, it has no response. But now I know you are engaged. Now I know you are listening. Now I know you are hooked and really participating. So if I click this, you see, I hope you can see the increasing number here, and this indicates the number of people who were able to access the form. In my check, there were like more than 3,000 registrants to the webinar, but only this number could access the form. So this is a reality that we have to anticipate, that even if we thought online form is a good platform for assessment, probably there is access for some, but others may not have access to it. So you have to anticipate all possibilities. So here, I could see now your responses. And most of you chose letter A. Well, you can see here the statistics. So most of you chose letter A, but my response here, I put a check on letter C, and I'll explain that later. Okay, so let's see. Again, this is not a graded test, so we should not worry if we have different understanding. And if we differ in our understanding, then that explains why we have to to engage each other in a discussion like this so that we could have sharing of our understanding of the concepts that we are using. So I could see your responses here. The most popular answer is A. And C. Well, for number 1, the most popular is A. For number 2, the most popular is now A. Based on responses, so I hope you could see the change here. In number 3, the most popular is A again. And then for number 4, many responded A as wrong. For number 5, many responded letter C. Okay? Letter D. Okay, so you see the responses of everyone. Now, let me move on to my slides. As I want to be fair for those who were not able to access my form. So this is now what we have to be ready with. Because we talk of flexible learning, you have to anticipate the resources that students have when you design your instruction and when you design your assessment. So if in case there are students who could not access the form for some reasons, maybe poor internet connection, or probably they don't have the software or the application that is needed for them to access it, then you have to be ready to provide them an option. Now, this is the challenge in us assessors. If I have to prepare a paper-based assessment for the same purpose I said a while ago of knowing what your prior knowledge is of the topic, then I can change the format in a more practical form, using a more practical form. So I use this time a sort of semantic differential scale where you see, the scales in between two different or opposite terms, I cannot do this in the form I used earlier. So it does not have this format. So this is some sort of adjustment on your part. But I find this format more practical. So I'm displaying the items in a format that is more practical. So I'm using this format. What I want you to do, all of you who are tuned in, who were not able to access our form, is to choose your answer from 1 to 7. Okay, I have 3 items here. I put 5 items in my test, and if I have time, I can show all the 5 in this format. But in the interest of time, I just want to give you 3 items, just so I could give you the idea of how we can design a student-centered approach in assessing learning. Okay, I hope you have picked your number. This is just a 3-item assessment. So now let's find out, what does it mean when your response is close to 1? Again, I cannot see your answers for now because I'm using paper format. But in the online that I showed a while ago, I was able to gather data on what your prior knowledge is. And I could come up with a good explanation or probably instruction if I use the data in explaining the topic. But again, I need to go back to the slides and link you again or link us again to the form. And in the interest of time, I don't want to do that anymore. But I showed to you the power of online assessment because you could automate everything. The data collection is quick. The analysis of data is also quick. So if you want to design your instruction based on what your students bring with them in the classroom, then that's powerful using the online format. But here, I need to gather your test papers and find out what your responses are. So that makes it a little bit impractical if in case you have that access to online. So again, what does it mean if you chose a response close to 1? If you chose a number close to 1, that means close to the teacher, then you see your students still teacher reliant. So maybe you are handling grade schoolers, as most students in this level would need somebody mature enough to scaffold their learning. And that's the social constructivism of Lev Vygotsky, that they need somebody to guide them. And we cannot just entrust, the decision making to them because they are not yet mature enough to make such decisions. So they need somebody mature enough to help them. And normally, in the learning process, in the classroom, the teacher does that role. But now, because of home-based instruction, that could be played by the guardian or the parents. So that's my view of of people who chose a figure close to one. I want to emphasize here the word yet. That is the growth mindset theory. We are not very conclusive here in saying you are teacher reliant, but at this point in your life, maybe you still need help. But in the future, I hope you get to become more self-reliant. So that is 7. When we see our students capable of deciding for themselves without necessarily relying on others, as they are mature enough to decide for themselves. If you chose a response close to the center, then that to me is what we should be doing when designing a student-centered assessment, especially if the modality of instruction is flexible, meaning there are many routes in doing it. And I chose 4 because the message there of 4 to me, you could disagree, that is saying, well, we have to wait. We cannot decide yet on our instruction if we do not know the kind of learners that come to our class. So that there is a need first to know your students. That's why needs assessment is very important, so that we could come up with the right design for instruction and assessment given what they bring with them when they enter the classroom. So 4 indicates flexibility, that you could lean to being teacher-centered if you are needed, or you can totally leave them, just guide them with less supervision if you know they are reliant enough, no, self-regulated. They could decide for themselves without necessarily relying on mature individuals. All right. So what about if after gathering all the papers, you saw different responses, just like what I saw in the online assessment a while ago. Some chose close to the teacher, then others close to the students, and others in between. So that is a reality that we have to anticipate. But what does it mean when when your students are at different entry points? No, some are too dependent and some are self-reliant. You have to be ready with this possibility, because if this happens, then that means you should be well prepared, flexible enough to accommodate all their needs. Now, when we talk of a flexible learning environment, this could be the scenario. So you have to again imagine what kind of learners you have. Are they the learners who would rely much on the teacher or a mature individual to facilitate their learning? Or are they old enough, mature enough to be on their own? If you see your students as still needing guidance from the teacher or a parent or a guardian, then ask yourself, can you do it in face-to-face? Or do they have access to other modalities? So if they are far from you, let's say the parents are working and no one else could assist the child but the teacher, can you reach out to your students even at a distance, like being open or distance or remote? If this is the route that is needed for you as a teacher, then you ask yourself, are they connected or do they have connection? If not, then you have to send them some materials that could facilitate their learning. These materials could be print, videos, or if it is print, it could be modular, workbook, and so on. I highlighted module because this is the best material that we could provide them to minimize too much reliance on the teacher. Because in a module, you provide everything. You start with your objectives down to your post-assessment, and then you give feedback every step of the way. If there are exercises, then you have to be ready with your feedback. That should be part of your module. But if the feedback is not given there, then you have to keep on communicating with them. And you have to wait when they are ready to listen to you, or you are also ready to give feedback to them. That is not so practical if this modality you are embarking on is open. So for them to be trained to be reliant, then you have to provide the resource that they need, and that is in the form of a module. Now, ask yourself, maybe you're not ready with a printed module or any print material. So ask yourself, pwede bang, can you deliver it by air? So are they connected? If not, can your message be transmitted through television? But this is one way. They could only hear you, but you cannot hear them. Or through radio. Again, that's one way. Or better if through phones, because at least this allows two-way communication, and this allows synchronous sharing. If they are online, it could be asynchronous and synchronous. If it is online, I would rather go for LMS. Again, why? I'll explain later. I need I need to ensure that when I choose a platform for assessment, that platform should enable me to assess the students in all forms possible. So if in case they are connected, then for me, whether it is a paid or free LMS, I would still go for having an LMS. As a manager or school owner or office official of the school, it would be easy to control, to manage, to supervise everything that is happening in the school if your school is your LMS. So imagine your school as like your LMS, where you have control of everything that is happening there. But if everyone, subscribes to whatever LMS or platform he or she has access to, that would be difficult to manage. As the school official, it would be difficult for you to do that. So I go for assessment via LMS, and then integrate all other forms like what I did a while ago, integration of forms from MS Forms or other forms you are more familiar with. Now, when we talk of designing student-centered assessment, the rule is always like this: for us to ensure that what we assess is what we implemented, the curriculum that we subscribe to. And to some, they can design assessment even without instruction yet. That's possible too. That's the understanding by design by Wiggins and J. McTighe. That's possible. However, if we want to be student-centered, we need to, if ever you took this route, from curriculum, you design your assessment, go back to what you have drafted and see if it is designed parallel to how the students were instructed. So if you want to be more student-centered, make sure curriculum is the reference for instruction, and the assessment referred not only to the curriculum but also to the instruction. So there is constructive alignment. And of course, you have to consider that the instruction could come in different modalities in a flexible learning environment, the one that I explained earlier. Now, let's talk about the alignment of the curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Nowadays, I guess you have access or probably seen in Facebook the MELCs, or the most essential learning competencies, that has been released by the Department of Education to reduce the so many competencies we cover in every subject area and just to focus on the essentials. So that is the MELCs, no? And then ask yourself, given the MELCs, do I have the time to pre-assess which of these competencies the students have already acquired and which of those they need to still acquire? So if you have time to pre-assess, so you say yes, then administer your pre-assessment. Whether that is commercialized or teacher-made, it's good to start with your pre-assessment so that you could reduce all the options, all the possibilities in designing instruction. Because if you don't start with a pre-assessment, then you have to prepare an instruction that anticipates all, from paper to online or couriered or just using radio or telephone and so on. So many preparations on your part. It looks short if you don't pre-assess, but in the long run, it's not practical. Okay, so this is the MELCs that I mentioned. So DepEd has released this, so I want you to direct your attention to this when you have access to it, and try to see what are considered now essential to reduce the amount of time students will have to spend for each subject area in the curriculum. So if If I ask you which route is easier for you and you chose this route, no pre-assessment is done, then take the consequence of not giving pre-assessment, not giving a survey or needs assessment, because that means you have to anticipate all possibilities, because you have to be fair to your students as to the resources that they have access to. And not all of your students would have the same resource that the teacher has in the classroom. So be fair to them by addressing all possibilities. But if you chose this route and you administer it, then there will be minimal, because you will only prepare instruction according to the kind of resources that students have. If almost all of them have access to internet, then you could just design instruction for internet access, and then those who do not have access to it could be the ones who would be needing your module. And then you can design, of course, a module, or if there's no module yet, you're not ready with it, then maybe the textbooks or the work texts that are available, which publishing companies usually produce, or those that are available in the open education resources of DepEd. Now, if you chose the route of giving pre-assessment, this is the scenario. So you ask yourself, after giving the pre-assessment based on the essentials, no, the milks, for example, if the results is if the result tells that the students have acquired all the essentials already, should you give still the instruction that they need? Of course not. Okay, we don't want to waste their time repeating or going through an instruction where the skills that they need to acquire are already skills they are equipped with. We don't want to waste their time. Or if they know some but do not know the others, then that's where they need instruction. Or if not at all the more that they need instruction. My only concern is, usually pre-assessment is one tool assessment that we give at the start of the school year. There is no such thing as perfect assessment. So if, let's say, you claim, imagine that this is a pen and paper test, and let's say the students got a perfect score here, and you will just say, okay, let's verify if indeed you have acquired those. It's not possible that that tool captures all what you could assess. When we talk of targets of assessment, there is no single tool that could assess all targets. You need multiple measures. So most likely, you still need to provide instruction even to those students who, let's say, perfected your tool, your pre-assessment, because there are skills that could not be captured in a pen and paper modality. So you go to this route and check the results, if you give test, task, or portfolio, and see if they all speak of the skills that you should acquire as essential to survive. Now, when we talk of assessment, as I said, there are three approaches possible, or maybe there could be more. Let's probably explore what the other modalities could be. But again, here I'm showing here the different routes when you assess them. It's not just knowing the approach, but you also have to know how they were instructed and how you could administer your assessment. So if it's going to be home-based, face-to-face, then that would be probably using the paper modality and other forms. But if it is online, then again, that is a choice you have to consider, and all other choices here. Okay, it could be work from the workplace, or it could just be couriered or aided by technology. Like if it's going to be a phone, there will be an interview via phone, and other modalities, which could include combination of two or more of these modalities. Now, of course, because I keep on talking about assessment, I just put here my definition, my operational definition, but this probably is not so needed to you. Again, just for emphasis, no, I highlighted here, for example, that I mean assessment to as a process of gathering quantitative, and that's where measurement is needed, or qualitative indicators or evidences of learning as basis for decision making. And once you make decisions, that's where you need evaluation. And here are some possible targets when we assess learning. Others could reduce this into three, like just recalling, for example, in our first webinar, what you could assess are the ABCs. So what are the ABCs? The affect, the behavior, and the cognition. Or you could make it more detailed by considering these ideas from Macmillan and Stiggins. Okay? And the purposes of assessment, that should be clear to us too, that there is assessment for learning, which is instructional in its purpose, or assessment of learning, which is where we think of certifying what the students have actually learned, or assessment as learning, which is an assessment that enables the students to do the assessment without necessarily waiting for a judgment of others. So this is the empowering assessment, because we explain to the students why they need to assess and co-assess their own learning. Sorry. What happened? Sorry. Okay, so as to how do we assess, again, we have to bear in mind the principles. And in one webinar, I discussed this already, and I just want to have a quick sharing of these two, that we cannot proceed to assessing learning without being mindful of the principles, no, to make our assessment student-centered. If you cover all these assessment principles, then you are more student-centered in your way of assessing learning. But if you cover only a few, then that is less student-centered. So again, the more principles that guide your assessment practice, the more student-centered you are. So again, what are these? You have to be purpose-driven. You know what you are targeting, if it's knowledge, reasoning, products, affect, and skills. And you have to make sure that you choose the right method or the right approach to assessing learning to make it valid, and that you get consistent results from all the measures that you use. And then in your assessment, you reflect reality, because assessment should be able to help students understand what they will likely do, or where they will be likely using what they come across in their assessment. So that is to make it authentic or realistic. And we have to be fair in our language, that our test is good for whatever language the students use at home or in school. The religion is attended to, and gender, and so on. No, it has to be fair and inclusive, and it should be practical. It is a continuous process. It's not a one-time assessment. It is holistic, that it covers all targets from the affect to behavior to cognition, and it is balanced. That means we use all possible approaches, as there is no approach that is perfect. The imperfections of one approach could be complemented by the strengths of another. And lastly, that it should be ethical, that we have to be careful in the way we handle the data and communicate this to our students. And when it comes to approaches, I mentioned we could categorize this into three. No, K-Burke categorized the approaches into three, naming them as traditional, referring to pen and paper assessment. It could be graded or non-graded. Then the performance-based, which will be highlighted by Dr. Cha in his presentation after my this part, and portfolio, which I will explain again after Dr. Cha's presentation. I just want to emphasize here that the arrows, as there is no perfect tool, we really need to use multiple sources so that we could validate whatever the results are from one using the data coming from another source. Because in the end, we have to make a decision, and the decision making is difficult if we are not guided by sound data. So that's something we have to consider. And again, when we talk of assessment, there are different techniques and tools. If we talk of traditional, the tools could be tests or non-tests, like the checklist, scales, and others for the assessment of affect or disposition. And when it comes to performance-based, usually they could be classified into two, as demonstrations, or those that would require showing or demonstrations of your skill, what you know, and what you are capable of doing, and creations. And whatever you use between these two, whether it's demonstration or creation, usually they need rubrics. And the other one is portfolio. I just put here two, documentary or show, or you can combine more formats. And when portfolio assessment is used, again, there is no single tool for that. It's not enough to have a rubric. You need multiple measures to be able to see the totality of that person, that kind of person you develop in your instruction. And when we talk as to who to assess, again, most often we see teacher as the most credible assessor of students' learning. But now we need to recognize that some of the processes that happen in the process of learning may not be within the supervision or monitoring of the teacher, and others could come into the picture. So we need to trust people if they are credible enough to participate too in the assessment of the child's learning. Like, well, if they have peer or the siblings, the self, the parent, and others. Others there could probably those who witness your capability if, let's say, you are doing a practicum. And now, when we talk of modalities, again, we all know this, that it can be face-to-face or it can be online, and all other combinations or modalities that are not included could fall under this. Okay, so to me, whether you deliver face-to-face or in another format, there is always a common. Okay? And what are these commons? The commonalities in all modalities, that we should set clearly our targets. The purposes must be clear. We should be guided by the principles. There could be 10 or more, and the approaches should be chosen with regard to the targets that you have set. Choose the right technique and the tools and the right assessors of students' learning. So these are the basic concepts, principles that I hope I made clear to you, so that when Dr. Cha takes over and I explain to you portfolio assessment, we don't have to explain again these concepts. So that's it, Mother Bell. I'm done with the first part, and I will be followed by Dr. Cha.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let us now listen to Dr. Richard Gonzales. Dr. Cha?
Yes. Yes, good morning and magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Yes, good morning and magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Doc Lynn and Mother Bell. And thank you, PEMEA and Amicus Coi Solutions for this opportunity to have this conversation virtually. I need to share, okay, my slides, sorry. Thank you, Mother Bell and Doc Lynn, and of course, thank you, PEMEA and Amicus Coi Solutions for this opportunity to have this conversation with you virtually. We are in challenging times, but the quest for learning and sharing has never discouraged us. Yes, we are coping, adapting, and continuing to be resilient and taking the crisis as an opportunity for us to grow and to become more human. I am Richard Gonzales. I am known to my friends and colleagues as Doc Cha. I am here to share some ideas and conversation and have conversation with you virtually on how to unlock the potential of performance-based assessment in flexible learning environment. I will share some basic concepts, strategies, and some examples. So what is happening now? The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted our normal life, okay, particularly schooling of children. It has put us into challenging situation. While the situation is challenging, the emergence of flexible learning has given us lots of opportunities and leverage on how we can improve assessment and practices and education system in general, not just to cope and or adapt to the crisis, but to be transformed and more humane in our assessment practices. Now, we need to embrace this new normal life, the emergency of normal life of the emergency remote education. In this slide, I am sharing you what the DepEd has learned, the lessons learned by DepEd presented or shared recently, okay? Highlighting the difference of old school and the new school, the new normal or the new normal school, which is just published recently. While we hear no school will open unless there is vaccine, we are still here very hopeful and advocating options for the new school, and one of them is flexible learning. Since we can't escape from this flexible learning, how do exams and assessment in flexible learning environment? We have three dilemmas here. One, what work in face-to-face learning won't work online or in flexible learning. So we need to explore the robustness of assessment strategies and approaches. Some content in our subjects courses is best assessed in one way, and other content is best assessed in other ways. So we need to customize our assessment to the materials presented in flexible learning. It is also important to match assessment with the delivery method. So while the objective exams may be effective to face-to-face, this has less value in flexible learning. In flexible learning, students have to show their ability to apply skills and knowledge learned from a unit or units of study. Hence, the need for authentic performance-based assessment. The focus of this webinar is student-centered assessment in flexible learning. So this is the outline of my presentation. First, I will be discussing what is it? Student-centered, flexible learning, assessment, particularly performance-based assessment. Second, I will be discussing how to design student-centered assessment. And third, how to design PBA or performance-based assessment. And lastly, I will share some examples. Of course, I will just be giving you summaries of this because we all know that even in undergraduate, we have assessment 1, assessment 2 as courses, and it will be taken in 1 year, and yet I'm trying to put all these things in 30 minutes. So what is it? Now let's define our key terms. Student learning, first, let's ensure that we have the same understanding of the terms and concepts that we will use in this presentation. These terms are not new to us, but let me define them so that we can continue this conversation with the same level of understanding. What is student-centered learning? Student-centered learning addresses the distinct learning needs, interests, aspirations, or cultural backgrounds of individual students or group of students. Second, student-centered assessment. Student-centered assessment embodies the practices for active engagement in learning and responsibility for management of learning are core assumptions. Like any good assessment, student-centered assessments articulate approximately challenging and developmentally appropriate learning target. It provides feedback to students, teachers, schools, and districts about how we deepen learning. Lastly, in flexible learning, flexible learning is a set of educational philosophy and systems concerned with providing learners with the increase of choice, convenience, okay, and personification to suit the particular learning need. Flexibility here means anticipating and responding to the ever-changing needs and expectations of learners and the society. It is about giving and providing greater choice for learners. This includes the choices when, where, and how learning occurs. It allows students to take the course on a face-to-face or completely online or in a blended fashion with no learning the fishing. Of course, adopting a flexible learning approach doesn't mean changing everything about your teaching and learning. Okay, performance is also another concept that we need to define. I am using the definition of DepEd that performance refers to the real life application of understanding as evidenced by students' performance of authentic tasks. In our conversation, okay, and then of course performance-based learning. Uh, in, Learning in an environment where students expected to be aware of competencies that are important to them. In our conversation, we also define PBA or performance-based assessment as testing. Okay, that's the fourth one. Okay, assessment or testing that requires the students to create answers. Okay, take note of this, to create answers or products that demonstrate his or her knowledge and skills, that is what he or she has learned from a unit or units of study. So what are the features of student-centered assessment in flexible learning? Individualizing assessment involves differentiating learning targets and tasks based on students' learning processes. It should be focused on learning and growth. Assessment is more than measuring and providing report, learning, or the lack of it, but providing feedback to students, even to parents. Feedback to motivate students and know their learning growth. Student-centered assessment involves active engagement of students for their learning, monitoring their progress, and determining how to address learning gaps. Okay, this we all know, that we need self-regulated learning. Okay, SCA also provide useful information to adapt the curricula and learning approaches and instruction. And lastly, okay, hence the assessment. Okay, I am showing you this picture. Look at it and reflect your understanding and beliefs on assessment and student learning. Okay. For fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb the tree. You have the bird, you have a monkey, you have a dolphin, elephant, a fish, okay, a dog, and so on. Therefore, assessment plays a very important role in creating a more student-centered learning. Now, how do we design student-centered assessment? Each teacher, school, or district has an articulated assessment system or program. These systems or program provide guides in designing and even revising assessment to enhance learning. There are so many ways. Dr. Marilyn presented already, how to design the basics on how to design student-centered assessment. But what I am presenting to you is I am adapting the Huber and Freud's 4 fundamental elements of student-centered assessment. Together with it, I would like to use the plan, do, check, act, cycle in designing student-centered assessment. In the PDCA, okay, which is a planning tool originated from Deming cycle and Sherwood cycle, it is a 4-step model carrying out change. Just as the cycle has no end, the PDCA model for CSA should be repeated again and again for continuous improvement. First, plan. What do I want my students to learn? This stage includes the first fundamental component of assessment, which is formulating statements of intended learning outcomes. Second, do. How do I teach effectively? This stage includes the 2 stages: development and selection of student assessment measures, and creating experiences learning to learning outcomes. Okay, and check are my outcomes being met? This stage involves evaluation of assessment data, which is part of comfort component. And lastly, act. How do I use what I've learned? This stage involves reinforcing successful practices and making revisions of enhanced learning part of the fourth component. So this is easy to remember. PDCA, you plan, formulate statements, you select the assessment, you create learning experiences, and then you check, and then you act, and then it's a continuous cycle. The next slide shares the framework of assessment approaches and methods. Okay, this is proposed by Machay and Ferreira, wherein they have dichotomized assessment approaches and methods into two: selective response items, which we are all very much familiar with, the MCQ, the true or false, the matching type, and we have performance-based assessments. We have the constructed responses, the product-oriented performances, process-oriented, and of course, portfolio is part of this. Okay, so now let's zero into performance-based assessment. The question is, why PBA in flexible learning? The answer is because PBA or performance-based assessment is very robust. Okay, PBA is an alternative a form of assessment that wherein we require our students to complete a task and produce a project, whether it is oral, written, or group project that exhibit their understanding of a concept that they have learned. Typically, the tasks in PBAs challenge learners to use their higher order thinking skills in creating product or completing a process. Okay, that's according to Chun. And lastly, tasks in PBA can range from simple to complex activities. So why use PBA in flexible learning? Because PBA looks at higher order thinking skills and practical application of what they have learned. Okay, PBA measures where students can apply the knowledge and skills that they appropriately in various contexts. That means authenticity of the assessment. Okay, PBA allows students to monitor themselves. Okay, because in PBA we use self-assessment as well self-assessment, student self-assessment, and PBA goes hand in hand with the new modern normal teaching strategies such as active learning or blended learning or flexible learning. We also have to recognize or to realize the benefits of PBA. In PBA, students who are likely more involved in the learning process absorb and understand the material at a much deeper level. Also, okay, in PBA, okay, there are more than one correct answers, and this encourages creativity among the learners or students. Okay, PBA tracks students' work on tasks, especially real-life world tasks. PBA shows the student the value of their work progress because later on when we show the rubrics, you can really see that the students have to monitor their work progress as well as appreciate what they are doing. And PBA, and lastly, PBA helps students to self-monitor so that they can use tools such as periodic reflection, learning logs more effectively. But there are also drawbacks, okay? And there are more, in my list, there are more drawbacks than the benefits. But this should not discourage you, okay? PBA addresses fewer learning objectives. It is intimidating to students who are used to memorization. It requires careful monitoring and standardizations, hence the use of rubrics. Usually, it requires more response time than traditional standardized Like in multiple choice, if you have 50 items, it can be done in 30 minutes or in an hour, but not for PBA. And often requires administration of an accompanying assessment item that allows students to explain one or more aspect of their products. And lastly, okay, since PBA requires rubrics, okay, there are so many times, in many cases, we need to change, we need to review, we need to revise our rubrics depending upon the activity as well as the characteristics of our learners. Right? PBA has theoretical foundations. Okay, PBA is grounded on constructivism, the idea of doing and creating meaning as one goes along is actively assimilated in PBA. There are also elements of social reconstructivism because we ask students to do authentic activities. So the focus is on providing it provides students the critical tools to be agents of change, explore controversial issues, and analyze world events. Now, okay, I'm just sharing you the two basic dichotomy of PBA, the process and product oriented, and Dr. Lynn Balagtas will share the other one, which is and elaborate more on the portfolio assessment. So we have the process oriented. Process oriented PBA focuses on the actual tasks and evaluates the actual tasks. For example, oral presentation, conducting experiment, etc. While the product-oriented is concerned with the final product made or produced, not the actual performance of making the product. And it is also a focus on evaluating the results. For example, instead of just conducting the interviews, the output would be research project or experiment lab report or laboratory experiment report. So now, what are the steps in conducting PBA? The steps are very, very similar. In fact, I'm not presenting a very new idea here. Okay, we are not reinventing the wheel. The steps are very similar to any traditional assessment, except that you need to define the activity, which is the performance task, and you need to develop a clear rubric. So, okay, this is, most of your work would be on 2, 3, 4. I am suggesting 5 simple steps, okay? There could be more. You can always modify the steps, particularly in flexible learning, but these 5 steps must always be there. Okay, first, define the purpose. In order to administer any good assessment, you must have a clearly defined purpose. Thus, you must ask yourself the several important questions. What concept, skills, or knowledge you are trying to assess? Second, what level should my student be performing? So if you are teaching grade 1, okay, grade 6, grade 7, grade 12, or university students, the purpose would be different. Okay. Next, what type of knowledge is being assessed? Okay. And then, of course, okay, and then what type of knowledge is being assessed and what level should my students be performing? Next, you move to choosing the activity. Okay. After you have defined the purpose of the assessment, you can make decisions concerning the activity. There are some things that you must take into consideration when you are choosing the activities. These are the time constraints, availability of resources in the classroom or at home, how much data is necessary in order to make informed decision about the quality of student performance. This consideration is frequently referred to as sampling. Third, after you have determined, of course, examples of activities can be oral presentation, reading a poem, like doing science experiments, debates, performance, okay, like dancing, singing, painting, and even simple tasks like preparing a flag of a country. Okay, and there are two types of tasks. Either this is restricted, just simply write one page, give 1 minute speech. Okay, name the name at least 5 countries of ASEAN member countries, etc. An extended task could be writing a short story, painting a picture, designing and conducting an experiment, and making a report. Okay, those are potential activities that you can do in PBAs. Now, after you have determined the activity as well as what types will be included in the activity, you need to define which element of the project or task determine the success of student performance. Sometimes you may not be able to find this criteria in local. You may be able to find this criteria in local and national curriculum or in published documents, such as the newly published MELC of the DepEd. Although these resources may prove to be very useful to you, please note that some lists of criteria may include too many skills or concepts and may not fit your needs exactly. With this in mind, you must be certain to review criteria list before applying any of them in your performance-based assessment. Hence, you must develop your own criteria most of the time. You may even wish to allow students to participate in the process. You can do this by asking your students to name the elements of the project or task that they should use to determine how successfully it was completed. If your students were not already involved in the process in determining the criteria, you will usually want to share them with your students. And in a flexible learning, you also have to share this to parents. This will help parents as well as students, in particular, know exactly what is expected of them. The fourth step, which is the most challenging one, is preparing a rubric. Okay, and a rubric may be holistic or analytic. As opposed to most traditional forms of testing, performance-based don't have clear-cut right or wrong answers. Rather, there are degrees to which a person is successful or unsuccessful. Thus, you need to evaluate their performance in a way that will allow you to take varying degrees in, of consideration. This can be accomplished by creating rubrics. Okay, as I have said, creating rubrics, is probably a three meetings or 3-hour course in our undergraduate or graduate courses. So I suggest that PEMEA would consider offering another webinar on development of rubrics, okay, as part of the development of professional development of our teachers. Okay, the last one is assessing. Using the criteria as well as the rubrics, you can give feedback to students' performance either in the form of narrative report or a grade. There are several different ways to record the results of performance-based, either using checklists, narrative, anecdotal records, or anecdotal approach, rating scale, or memory. But please note that memory as an approach is not recommended. While it is standard procedure for teachers to assess student performance, teachers may wish to allow, and I'm highly recommending this, students to assess themselves or do self-assessment. This time, in a flexible learning environment, parents can also do assessment of performance of their children, given the fact that they need to support their children understand the fact and the task and expected product. As I have mentioned, what makes PBA different from the traditional assessment is the need of a clearly defined performance task. And the rubrics, as well as the rubrics used to measure or assess the performance or output. A performance task is any learning activity or assessment that tasks asks students to perform to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding, and proficiency. Examples can be composing a letter, preparing poster, conducting experiment, writing an essay, okay, etc. Okay, performance tasks yield a tangible product and or performance that serve as an evidence of learning. Performance tasks present situations that call for learners to apply their learning in a context, okay, authentic situation. So what are the characteristics of performance tasks? Performance tasks call for the application of knowledge and skills, not just recall and recognition. Performance tasks are open-ended and typically do not yield single correct answer. Established in a novel and authentic context of performance and provides understanding via transfer. It's multifaceted. Okay, it can be integrated in 2 or more subjects as well as 21st century and it is and open-ended tasks are evaluated with established criteria and rubrics. Again, okay, in any performance test and in PBA, in performance assessment, the key here is development of the activity, development of rubrics, and development of criteria for and then the rubrics. So what is the role of the rubrics? Okay, I know in your assessment courses you have studied the develop rubrics, and probably you are also making now in your classes. While this is important in our discussion and conversation today, I guess we need another webinar solely dedicated in developing rubrics for traditional as well as PBA. Anyway, here are some guidelines in creating rubrics. Okay, uh, be sure the criteria focus on important aspects, match the type of rating with the purpose of the assessment, etc. So there are listening. So my presentation, I believe, will be shared in our PEMEA website, and after this, so you can access. You have more. You can read more of this. Okay, in the interest of time. Okay, and there are two main types of rubrics. Okay, the holistic one and analytic rubrics. Okay. The holistic one provides comprehensive description, while the analytic breaks down criteria into distinguishing between levels of performance and its criteria. Of course, aside from holistic and analytic rubrics, you also have the single point rubric, which is a very simple one. Okay, I'm giving you examples of holistic rubrics. You can easily find samples of rubrics in almost all subjects in the internet, of course, from textbooks as well. Again, I suggest another seminar in developing assessment rubrics. So finally, what makes PBA successful? What you need to make performance assessment successful? First, okay, you need template and rubrics. Performance assessment for students will be a balancing act between an open-ended nature of the project and the competencies and mastery they need to demonstrate. You can either share full guidelines on how the project will be graded with your students if that is likely to overwhelm your class. Build templates for intermittent assessment that explain what must happen at each stage and when. First instance, an abstract. For example, a research report, you need to prepare an abstract, the first draft, final draft, and of course, final presentation. Second, you need to provide examples and benchmark as well as models, whether it is good or bad. Okay, most of our students are not familiar with PBA, performance-based assessment. So it is students who are not set to open-ended tasks for summative assessment or items to create portfolio, for example, will find previous examples crucial to success. Okay, so we should be ready for samples, examples of PBAs if you are asking your students to do it. Okay. Second, as I have said, samples could be good or bad. Okay, you need also to present not so good examples so that you can use this as your conversation piece with your students on how and what is the best, okay, performance-based output or PBA output. Third, help your students prepare and practice. Although many students may have done performance assessment in the past, there will be others to whom the concept is completely new, especially now. So you need to set milestone in the form of mini performance assessments. In preparation for final tally will get used thinking in a new way and to reduce anxiety that might affect their overall performance. Okay, just like when we are giving paper and pencil tests, students are asking, give us sample items, give us sample tests. Okay, because giving samples or asking your students to practice will be beneficial for them. And lastly, you have to leverage with your team or with your community. It is rare that a performance assessment would touch on a single or touch on a single course. They are most likely interdisciplinary. Okay, don't attempt to produce a performance assessment and the communication with your students alone. Get assistance from fellow teachers. Okay, learn from them. Get lessons. Share lessons learned from providing PBAs with your community or with your teachers, and even for parents as well as students. After all, if performance assessment is meant to measure real-world application of knowledge rather than simply producing a facsimile of your lesson, your task should reflect the real world. And the reality is seldom based on a single subject area. Now, okay, I'm now on my fourth part of my presentation. Now let's see some examples. What I will share as examples for PBA as are the actual performance tests of my son. Okay, my apologies for sharing this example. Okay, examples. Now, I am sharing this not as a teacher this time, but as a parent of a grade 1 student. Okay, I wish I could share the learning management system or LMS of their school, but because of confidentiality, I opted not to share. Anyway, in the previous webinars, Dr. Jonathan, Dr. Tin, Dr. Carlo presented several LMS, and later on, Dr. Marilyn will also share actual LMS. So I'm sharing you the performance test for science and math grade 1. Okay. The performance test lists the goal, the role, the audience, the situation, and the product. The goal is for the kid, for my son, to identify the kind of energy in its appliance, that you use in school at home. You also need to solve the change which you will get from the payment of the electricity. Okay, so to make it more authentic, okay, the son has to assume the responsibility of being a family member who wants to save energy. Okay, and the audience are family members. This is the role play, and the situation is you got a Meralco bill, okay, for the year 2019, 2011 to 2020. A responsible member of society, you are to identify the kind of energy, and then you have to, and then the product is my son has to make a poster identifying the energy and to compute the differences of the monthly electric bill. So these are now, so this is the rubric for checking. So in terms of content, all pictures are pasted. Okay, one or two pictures, true or more. Solutions, answer all solutions correctly. Two or more, one to two solutions are incorrect. True or more solutions are incorrect. Resourcefulness, all materials are complete. One to two missing materials one to two materials were missing. True or more materials, etc. And then of course there is also a criteria on creativity and neatness of the output. So I'm sharing you the output of my son. So this is the poster that my son did. Okay, he pasted some pictures of appliances that produce energy, heat energy, light energy, and sound energy. Okay, and this is his math, the math component. Okay, it's just it's actually okay. The payment is payment is 87, and then the electric bill is 50. So the change is 53. So this is simple subtraction. Okay. Now I'm giving you another example of a performance base. Excuse me. This is another performance task. Please note that the rubrics used in this for this PBA is an example of a single point rubric. It's very simple. Okay, you just have to know the content. Okay, the problem with this, of course, it's difficult for the teacher to determine whether the student will get 4, 3, 2, 1 or 3, 2, 1, etc. Okay. The single rubric offers different approach to a systematic grading in the classroom. Like holistic and analytic rubric, it breaks the aspects of an assignment down into categories, clarifying to students what kinds of things you expect of them in their work. So now, okay, this is the output of my son. Okay, I hope the video works. It is okay, and okay, and later on, I will ask you whether this is a process or product-oriented PBA. I'll play the video now. I hope it works. Okay, so the scenario here is, okay, for the students is you are a new pupil in school. You are to tell something about yourself in class in order your classmates and teachers to get to know you. Use variety of adjectives. Take note here, use variety of adjectives to describe yourself, including your hobbies, favorites, etc. You will be graded based on the following criteria: content, use of adjectives, grammar, and voice production. Okay, the next slide, here's another example of PT using single rubric approach. This is in Filipino. I will read the guidelines in Filipino. Video ang sarili na binabasa ang tula. Ang kahusayan sa pagbasa at pagbigkas ng tula ay susukatin sa pamagitan ng mga sumusunod na pamantayan. Okay, and these are the pamantayan or the criteria: kaalaman sa paksa, wastong pagbigkas, pagbabago ng tinig, pagbibigay ng hangkop na damdamin, okay, tindig at tiwala sa sarili, at pakikipag-ugnayan sa mga manonood. So, and then this is the output of my son. I hope it will work. Okay, I will try to play the video, but I will just have to share that, please understand that my son's first language is English, and so he needed to go through, okay, a special Filipino and Aralin Panlipunan classes. when he moved to a school in the Philippines, coming from an international school. So I thus, although he understands Filipino because he studied also Spanish as his first a foreign language in his in international schools. I hope it works. Okay, so he needs to. Okay, for the interest of time, I will cut down the video and the audio. Okay, when I did, okay, I both my son and myself did an assessment for this. Uh, so to me, my son did not do well, but good enough considering that we only spent 5 weeks in classroom instruction here in the Philippines. Then we had the ECQ, and then the teacher, his teacher in Filipino, special Filipino, gave him this task. And I already expected my son, okay, could not read, could not pronounce words properly in Filipino, but I guess the good thing is at least he could read. Okay. Next, I will share you another PT in science and health, okay, which is more of a product, okay, uh, product as well as a process-oriented PBA. Okay, the goal is to plant a mango seed. Okay, observe the growth of the mango seeds for 3 days and draw your observations. Okay, the role of the student here is the student is a farmer. My son is a farmer, and the audience is a grade 1. The situation is the botanical garden is looking for seedlings to plant in the garden. You must grow mango seeds for donation in the botanical garden. Okay, and the product is mango seedlings planted in an eggshell placed in an egg tray. Very specific. Okay, and they need to submit a picture of themselves planting the mango, of your picture holding the mango plant on day 1, day 2, and the finished product. Okay. So, and this is the rubric. Okay, you have the criteria, you have the materials, they have complete materials. Are you following did you follow the directions properly? Okay, the time, the activity was done in a given time, and show, the attribute of caring by earth by taking the mango seedlings. Okay, and this is the product of my son. So this is the first day. Okay, the picture of my son showing the materials, the wooden spoon, the eggshell, and the mango seeds. And then he wrote some observation. Day 1, I planted mango seeds. I put some water to let it grow. Okay. And then this is the second day, my plant started to grow. And then the third day, okay, my plant continued to grow. I put some water and put it under the sun. And he even did more than 3 days. And okay, this is now fourth day, and I'm showing you. This is now the mango seed of my plant. It's now the mango plant of my son has now seeds and it's ready to harvest. Okay, after the COVID. Now, lastly, I would like to end my talk as a parent. Okay, parents in a flexible learning environment, we parents play a very important role as a facilitator of learning. We are not just there to switch on the computer or click the mouse. We are expected to be more engaged in the learning process of our children. As your parents, you should ask your teacher to explain the types of performance tasks to be used so that you can fully understand. You can request that the school give presentation. Okay, in the new school, in the school of my son. Okay, the new school of my sons, they are following a flexible learning program. Is we will have a 1 day, a half day orientation of parents on this type of learning modality or instructional modality. And then when you talk to your child about what he is or is learning, ask questions that encourage problem solving or creativity. Okay. And lastly, okay, ask and call for lifelines. Okay. ask your child if he is understand what is expected to do, and always ask for help. Okay. So to conclude, and this is my final takeaway, we need to ensure that we know how to make our, okay, now I'm talking as a teacher and educator, subjects more learner-centered and more learner-driven by taking the challenge, okay? It should be centered on the interests of the learner. Excuse me. Learners should be motivated to become an active participants, being engaged, focus on personification of learning process. Remember that not all students are ideal, okay, or A+ students. Okay, we should remember that, and we should be more humane. Learning assessment process should be aligned and integrated, and let parents we should be engaged. Okay, parents engagement is the key to success of a flexible or online learning environment. Maraming salamat po. If you have some questions, we will look into the Q&A questions, and then you can reach me. You can find me in Skype, Twitter, or in LinkedIn. And maraming salamat. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cha, and likewise with Dr. Marilyn. Truly, your lectures, both of your lectures, are very impressive, enlightening, and very enriching. I'm now convinced that learning is a continuous process, because as we listen to seasoned speakers like you and Doc Marilyn, our learning continuously are sustained. Okay, again, maraming salamat. Let's now pause for a break. But then allow us, or rather, before we continue and proceed to the second part of Doc Marilyn's presentation, let's have, or rather, let's listen to our payback time portion. We call it a payback because, as you all know, this webinar is being sponsored by people like our very own, very supportive and compassionate, generous Ma'am Rodora Santos, who is the CEO and President of Amicus Koi Solutions. So can we give her a 3-minute talk, and to be followed by our two sponsors, the Rex Bookstore and the Association of Colleges and Universities. Okay, take it away, Ma'am Rodora.
Thank you po. Marami pong salamat sa pagkakataon na binigay ninyo sa akin na makapag-share ng information, and also for your time and in choosing PEMEA to be one of your webinars. Salamat po. So for right now, let me just give you some introduction of what we do and what support that we could give to you. So let me share to you my screen, and marami pong salamat ulit sa pagpunta ninyo sa amin dito. Ako po si Maria Rodora Santos, at ako po ay may-ari ng ating Amicus Koi Solutions, and also this will be part of in partnership with Microsoft and also crayon experts. And this is actually in the actual setup that we have. So this is our third Microsoft Live session. Anything that we have right now is actually being shown utilizing the Microsoft Teams Live. As a co-organizer for PEMEA, I have a company based in United States, in Australia, and also in Philippines. And for right now, I am currently in Australia. So as you could see, our technology can now support the geographical location. And what we have right now is that Microsoft has actually opened up its door to allow all schools and universities to avail for the Office 365 Education A1 license. So as you can see, my favorite pastime is actually studying, and it's my relaxation. And I know all of us here in this particular webinar, that is our main trust. We wanted to continue training, mentoring, and helping each other. So, and the same thing with Microsoft. So for us, when we say no children will be left behind, no students will be left behind. But the question is, students are not just limited, of course, to those who are studying K to 12, higher education, or any master's or doctorate. It's actually all of us. All of us are students at a given point of time. So right now, we are in this lockdown mode, and all of us are trying to find a way, because we believe that education is bigger than COVID-19. We will be able to pass this. And so what we're doing for you right now is to give you that opportunity. So for my case, because I'm a Microsoft a partner, and I could help you with the Office 365 education. For right now, A1 is actually free for use and sign up for schools and universities. It's good for the educators to actually to be familiar with it. But if you are considering some of the platform, and I know that as a school, as an educator, we needed to be agnostic. But in my case, I would like to invite you to be part of the Microsoft Education platform. If you need some help, I have my email address. Please feel free to send me an email. Just put a title that you've heard about this during one of the PEMEA webinars, and that will be allowing me to give you I'll provide some support where necessary. So for right now, what we have in the Microsoft Education platform, this application allows you, or underneath it is the platform for Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams would allow you to have 250 participants, so you can do some sort of a collaboration, a presentation, you can talk to each other, and in a classroom setting will benefit you, because at least in absence of face-to-face, this may be one of the tools that you could utilize. And utilizing the entire Microsoft Education platform will actually allow you to at least have what we call a one-stop place of your hub. For this particular webinar, we have Microsoft Teams Live, which would allow up to 10,000 in live streaming. You can be interactive, and we saw a lot of your awesome questions in our Q&A. So thank you for being an active participant. Although you're just typing it up, we could see that you are actively listening and would really like to learn the process. One of the examples that Dr. Marilyn has shown earlier is the use of Microsoft Forms. Office 365 includes Microsoft Forms. It's a very quick survey. You could see the replies straight away. And what we're finding is that in quizzes, it at least alleviates some of the time constraints by the teachers, so let's say they have 45 minutes, wouldn't it be nice for you to ask your students to at least like read a chapter? And before you even start the lesson, you could actually ask them, okay, well, answer my pre-assessment, let's say 20 questions, and then luckily, some of the students responded and most of the answers were at least 15 correct. So therefore, as a teacher with a limited time frame, wouldn't it be nice that you'll concentrate first in the 5 major errors that they have done? So at least the subsequent questions, hindi na para siya paulit-ulit. Pwede na natin siyang mai-augment for confirmation. And I know too that we have concerns na papaano ba natin masasabi na sila nga ba yung sumagot. I know teachers, parents, people who's helping our students to make this online asynchronous or synchronous classes are trying to actually study. And I believe at the end of the day, it would be an ethical obligation by the parents who's helping them to actually teach them the right path. Kasi kung tuturuan natin sila at sasabihin natin sa kanila ang sagot, we're not really helping them, but we are actually putting them down. So, but those are the things that will be a learning curve. So I invite you that if you are to give some sort of a PTA or a meeting, utilize the Microsoft Teams Live, which would allow you up to 10,000 or 20,000, depending on the need. So for you to reach out para malaman ng mga magulang, kasi kagaya ng sabi ni Doc Cha, all of us are part of this. We have educators, we have parents, and we have, of course, students to worry about. And at the end of the day, all our successes is all our success, di po ba? So we have all these 3 steps of distance learning, and wherever you go, whether you're doing it face-to-face or online, the preparation is exactly the same. Technology is here to augment your knowledge as educator in the curriculum. And it's not meant to replace what you do, but it's actually to enhance what you've actually are very strong at. So we hope that our webinars and seminars like this will actually help you. At the end of our seminar today, please feel free to go to the PEMEA.org website. All of the information that we have shared here will be published there. And if you would like to actually sign up for any training or workshop or any other information that you wanted as you prepare for your online training, teaching, and mentoring, please feel free to scan the QR code displayed right now, or you can go to the link, the tiny URL that you see down below. I invite you to actually do so. Once again, thank you so much for your awesome participation. On behalf of PEMEA, ako po si Maria Rodora Santos from Amicus Core Solutions. Until next time, maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Rodora. May we now have the slides for our sponsors, Rex Bookstore, and the Association of the Local Colleges and Universities, Region 3.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Mark Anthony Vili, the marketing manager of Rex Bookstore, and I'm here to share with you our latest solution or feature for school year 2020-2021. So let us all help our students achieve mastery of essential learning competencies and skills through Rex Bookstore's learning pathways. So what is Learning Pathway? So it is a competency-based mastery learning mobile application that helps students achieve mastery of essential learning competencies and skills, as well as assist teachers in facilitating these learning competencies. It follows a mastery learning model where students learn at their own pace, begin by accomplishing activities and assessments that are appropriate to their level, and are allowed to progress from their initial level towards mastery level through timely feedback and learning and in sequence. So our goal here is to enable all learners, as we have recognized that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And we all know that learners enter the classroom with different levels of background, abilities, readiness, skills, motivation, and learning styles. And studies show that varying study methods and materials will improve retention and recall of information and enhance learning experience. So REX targets higher retention rate by focusing on practice doing with REX learning pathways. So how can you access the REX learning pathways? If you have your mobile phone, you could download the application through the App Store and Play Store, and you just need to register. And if you adopted Rex Vertex for school year 2020-2021, there will be a QR code that you could scan to access the content, and the students can begin their learning. So what does Learning Pathways have? So it has a 10-item pre-assessment for each competency and 3 sets of mastery learning tools which corresponds to the 3 pathways. And these are the building up, strengthening, and mastering. And after taking this path, all of the students will have to take a 10-item post-assessment for each competency. So for example, a student will select a target competency based on the subject he or she will be using, then take the pre-test to determine the level, and this pre-test will determine which path the student will take if he or she will be under the building up, strengthening, or mastering. So each path will have different lessons and assessments. And before proceeding to the next level, the student will have to take a post-test and before proceeding to the next competency. So Pathways combines the capabilities of technology and the features of effective teaching and learning, which are timely feedback, interactivity, accessibility, wherein students could use it anytime and anywhere, and it is stress-free, and it also has personalization or differentiation. And it is available in Rex Vertex for the following subject areas. So we have science, math, English, Filipino, and Araling Panlipunan for grade levels 4 to 10. And the good news is this is for free. Once you've adopted or will use Rex Vertex for school year 2020-2021, it is free for the copyrights 2018, 2019, and 2020. So let us teach for mastery and not test scores. So with Rex Bookstore Learning Pathways, let us all help students achieve mastery of essential learning competencies and skills. At with Rex Bookstore, tayong lahat kapit-bisig para sa bata, para sa bayan. Thank you very much and have a great day.
So let's now look at the slides prepared by the Association of the Local Universities and Colleges of Part 3, Region 3 rather.
I will now continue. So thank you very much to our sponsors. Uh, okay, so I'm back. Thank you so much for staying. I would like to continue what we've started. So earlier on, Dr. Cha talked about performance-based assessment. This time, I would like to give more focus this time on not so popular way of assessing learning, and this is through portfolio assessment. Earlier on, I showed these three major approaches in assessing learning, and we did not discuss traditional in detail as this has been somehow covered in webinar number 2, during the session of Dr. Carlo. And just a while ago, Dr. Cha talked about performance-based. This time, I would like to give emphasis on portfolio. And again, because I saw a lot of questions about appropriate approaches or techniques and tools in assessing learning. This is my response to that. You have to define your purpose again. So are you assessing knowledge and reasoning, for example? Then you can use tests. Or if more on affect and disposition, then you use non-tests. But if you are more on assessing more than knowledge and reasoning, but to include skills and affect as well, then do performance-based. So as you move on to other approaches, more targets could be assessed. So if we talk of creation, which is another performance-based, then you could include products here, which you cannot cover in demonstrations. Here I'm introducing portfolio, which is actually a method that falls under performance-based as defined by some. Like, for example, if we talk of Rick Stiggins, he would classify portfolio assessment as part of performance-based. But to other experts like Kay Burke, she would regard portfolio assessment as another approach, as it is not like performance-based, which is a one-time assessment. It is more authentic. So if we talk of degree of authenticity between performance-based and portfolio assessment is more authentic as it covers more indicators or evidences of students' learning. And it could show not only the product, but also the process of learning developed across time. Portfolio assessment is purposeful, ongoing, and dynamic process in gathering multiple indicators of learners' growth and development in a course or program of study. And I would like you to look at my samples. I've been doing this for more than 2 decades. And when I started, hindi pa uso, no? The use of digital and e-portfolio is not yet so popular, and so I started with paper-based portfolio. So as you can see, it is like a consolidation of all indicators of what one knows and is capable of doing. So you can, if we talk of different modalities and you opt for paper-based, then this could be an option for the students. Or for those with computers but not so good in their connection and they are not always connected, then maybe you could advise them in doing a digital portfolio, because here in digital they just have to print all the evidences of copies of their work, and then they can send this to you via, well, it can be couriered, but they have to be all documented in a CD or in a flash drive or whatever form possible, where all these evidences could be contained. Or it could be in a website like Sway could be one venue for that, which is under or one of the applications of MS, and this one was created in another platform. And the one that I recently discovered as possible too for portfolio assessment is an LMS-based e-portfolio, and I'll show this example later. I'll show examples later. So these are the targets again. I want you to consider again all the 5 learning targets that I mentioned at the start. When we talk of portfolio assessment, it could assess all. It's not perfect, but you can cover all of these. And if you have to design a rubric for your portfolio assessment, Of course, there could be different dimensions. So there could be a dimension to measure knowledge, a dimension to measure reasoning, skills, products, and affect. So that's how you will do it. So it's going to be like analytic or holistic or whatever combination of tools possible, appropriate for the nature of the target you are assessing. And in addition to the 10 principles that I mentioned a while ago, where you have to ensure that your assessment is purpose-driven, valid, reliable, authentic, practical, fair, holistic, balanced, and ethical, as to portfolio assessment, you have to ensure that it also follows these 3 additional principles. That what is contained in a portfolio should be reflective of what was delivered in your curriculum. So you can direct them to, these evidences of what you have planned or targeted for instruction. Well, of course, they could add more to it, but at least you should satisfy this. If you are, let's say, assessing students' learning in a course on assessment, then everything in the portfolio should be tools and other techniques employed that or one could make use of when we talk of sound assessment. And then learning principle. And what does that mean? That the process itself could be a venue for learnings that may not just be specific to the course, what the course intends to deliver or develop among learners, but other skills that they could gain in the process. Like, for example, they become very thoughtful, reflective. They are trained to become organized and to make decisions and evaluate their own decisions. And of course, equity principle, which means to say that when you require portfolio assessment, make sure that the different learning styles and multiple intelligences of the students are respected. So you should not prescribe as to how they should package it. Just set what we call as non-negotiables, but allow room for their decisions on how to package it or how to design it in a way that they like and enjoy doing. Okay, there are different ways of assessing through a portfolio, but of course, if I were to assess, I would go for documentary. If you are documenting a lot of evidences for a long period of time, that could be reduced to probably a show portfolio. So again, it depends. Some would start with a working portfolio. They just put everything that they gathered, and then later on, they select what is worth sharing to others as an evidence of learning. Now, just like other approaches in assessing learning, when you assess via portfolio, you always begin with your goals. And the goals could be classified into knowledge, into reasoning, products, affect, or skills. No? And then let the students collect all the possible evidences of all these targets that you've set and reduce this to just choosing the best, especially if you have a lot of evidences to look at and you cannot afford to peruse everything. So you can direct them to just selecting the best that could speak of what they actually know and learn in the process of learning. So train them to organize. But again, that could be their choice. The way they package all their evidences could be left to them. No, it can be their own decision and not necessarily dictated upon by the teacher. But don't forget to train them to reflect. They need to make a choice as to what evidence to show to speak of what they have attained from instruction, but they have to rationalize why they pick such evidence. So training them to be reflective is a very important component of portfolio assessment. Then train them to in evaluating their own work. So when we say evaluate here, this is where rubrics and other appropriate tools are necessary, and they have to be presented at the start. If we talk of portfolio development, that should be known to them at the start. It's not something that they should just be made aware of at the end. No, they should not be surprised in doing this by you telling this work at the end, because this is not how assessment is done, especially if it's through portfolio assessment. It requires preparation, and that means from the start, you explain to them what the course is all about, you should also explain to them that portfolio is a requirement or part of the process in assessing their learning, and all the tools in assessing their learning should be presented to them at the start so they could make sense of how they will be assessed after. So whatever instrument that the teacher uses in assessing students' portfolio should be the same as that which students have to use too when they assess their learning. So it should be the same. It cannot be different. Okay, so we train them to assess themselves too, so that in the end, when all relevant stakeholders have evaluated the work of the student, we can do triangulation because we know we refer to the same instrument or evaluation instrument. And then, of course, the best part of the portfolio development is when you allow students to exhibit their work. And this is a time for them to celebrate success of their learning and the success also of the teacher in delivering instruction, because you could have a good gauge of how effective you have been as a teacher by looking at the works of your students. It's not just one piece of work, but a collection of different indicators or evidences of learning. Again, without reflection, that's not portfolio assessment. So as Macmillan would say, the heart of portfolio assessment is students' reflection. And here are examples of students' reflection. They come in different forms. Some would reflect by saying a prayer. So the prayer contains what one feels, what one likes, and so on, the aspirations and so on. And others would be reflective by expressing how grateful they are to people who have influenced their learning. Others would just simply state their expectations or goals in learning. Others would add more to it by putting images or pictures or making a simple log, and not necessarily computerized. It can just be written. Or others would document meetings or other group activities that they have been part of, and of course what they have learned from all these activities they have been part of or they were engaged in. And this is another example. This one was done by a CTP student, to me mature enough to develop a reflection appropriate to the age. I thought that's how one would respond to it. But look at how one expresses his or her thoughts about the lesson, and the inclusion of an image that probably speaks of the liking of this person kasi mahilig siya sa mukhang anime, no? So that could be possible. And here is another one. This is a reflection, and you look at it. It was a work done more than 2 decades ago. So that's how long I have been practicing this. And this is a reflection in the form of a poem. A group reflection is also possible, and the different penmanships here would speak of the number of people in a group activity where group reflection is also necessary. And take note, you have to give feedback. That's important in every piece of work students put in their portfolio. And others, what I like here and why I'm showing it here is that we could accommodate the language of the learners. When they are asked to reflect, if they feel expressing their thoughts and feelings in a language that they speak at home or with anybody, then allow them to do such. It's not necessarily doesn't necessarily have to be the language of instruction all the time. Some people would want something manipulative, so this is another way of reflecting. And others are graphical. So here is like a Venn diagram that shows the realization of a person of his or her weaknesses, and so his or her strengths, and some areas that would need improvement. So this is another presentation. So what am I saying here? Just let the students present their thoughts, their feelings, or express their feelings in a manner that they prefer. So we don't have to compel them on a format that we want as their assessor, but what they prefer as a way of expressing who they are. So here is another. From first day to the last day is documented. Others would just draw like this one at first, or curious, and then probably problematic at the middle, and then look at the joy at the end after finishing the work. So that's how people could reflect if given the chance to reflect. All right, here are examples of portfolios. So we have here students picking the right cover for their portfolio, but they have to justify such decision as to the cover, the concept that they thought of in designing their portfolio. So these are just examples. So these are all paper-based portfolio. Okay, so some more. Now, of course, if you go for this kind of assessment, look at how problematic the situation could be for the teacher, as you need to peruse all, examine all those outputs given by the students as documented in their different organizers of or portfolio. Now, what I do, because I know that my students are capable of doing, I just ask them to do digital portfolios. So it's not to be as bulky as that you could see in my earlier slides, but this one, it's just in a CD, and all the works that they have done to show attainment of the objective set by the course are documented here, even their professional sharing, because I require them to organize, like a LARP session or learning action cell or professional sharing. And what they did, which I have not witnessed, could be part of their documentation. And of course, they have to explain everything that they did, including the process and not just the product. So this is an example. Okay, so they explain the cover. They have to decide on everything. It's not just putting there without any reason at all. Now, nowadays, 2 years ago, I started introducing e-portfolio. So I thought this is good because you can access your portfolio anywhere you are, as long as you are connected. So this is an example. Look at what my students could do. So these are teachers. I trained them in a graduate class, and of course, they are not techie people, but they were able to create their e-portfolio because I provided them a venue to develop their ICT skills as they are trained on some skills and knowledge. They are equipped with some knowledge that they have to know as teachers. So look at how they design it. This is not something I tell them to do, but something they decide for themselves. So the organization could vary. So this is another presentation, but you could see here the contents of the work. Okay, this one is another presentation. All the outputs are put in the page, and you could view them by clicking any of those points here. Here is a less cumbersome, as works are clustered in just a few folders. And recently, I discovered a platform where I could develop or practice portfolio assessment too, which is more secure. So let me click this so you can see the platform that I discovered. I found out because I've been teaching online courses too in the Philippine Normal University. I've been doing this for more than 2 decades. I started teaching online courses in 2006. But our platform does not have this. It is a free platform, and portfolio assessment is not a feature. But here, I discovered in this platform of Schoology that I could create my own portfolio. So if you click this, there is a portion here where you could announce anything about you. If you want some updates about you, like for example, my update here in my portfolio is that I'm going to run a webinar on designing student-centered assessment. So that's just an example. Or you can say something about yourself so that viewers of your work could know you more. So again, you have to be careful as to what you put there, because you have to, if this is a portfolio assessment, people would be able to read this, as it has to be shared if it's going to be assessed and graded after. So here is a blog, which is like a diary. It tells what your feelings are in your day-to-day activity. So this is just an example. But of course, other than those logs and info and updates about you, what I like in here is that you can put all your works here. Well, of course, my sample are my accomplishments as a faculty, as a professor at the Philippine Normal University, and my journey in this company that has given me access to this platform, because this is Rex Managed Schoology. It is a paid LMS. Of course, you can access a free LMS, but this is something you cannot see in a free LMS. So you can organize it in any way you want. You can rearrange it. And when you open one, for example, if I say, I want to know what I was able to publish in this company for my 2 decades of work with them. So you can see them, no, and you can add more to it. Okay, so that's one thing I like about a platform like this, where you can create your own professional portfolio too, and a lot more could be done here. And it's unlimited, no, you can add more, you can have videos and wait, I have to leave. Okay, you can have of course your information about yourself, your blog, you can display all your works there. But one thing you have to train your students on is to reflect on what they put there, to justify what they put there. So it is necessary that they annotate. So annotation is explaining why I put all these things here. What is the relevance of an output or an evidence that I put in my portfolio. When we talk of my professional journey in this company, for example. So this is just an example. I put there my explanations why I included these evidences in my portfolio. Okay, now I'm showing here a course that I'm trying to create in the platform, because we were able to publish a book on assessment in learning. Through this company, we have assessment in learning 1 and 2. These are 2 courses required in teacher education programs. And in assessment of learning 1, the focus of this is on written assessment. It's not on alternative assessment. But I want to emphasize that even if the focus is on written assessment, you can still develop or train your students to develop their learning portfolio or their course portfolio. So again, if you do that, it has to be articulated at the very start. And at the end, you could see here that there is an exhibit of their portfolio. So that's how I do it. In the platform, I put here examples of my students' portfolio as a form of exhibit from the digital. So you could see here different outputs, may digital, may electronic, and if, for example, that is paper-based, that's also acceptable. But of course, you cannot put that there in the LMS. Okay, now again, just to give you an idea how I intend to assess, if ever, let's imagine those entries here as outputs of my students in assessment, for example, assessment course, then how will I assess them? Again, you have to go back. Why am I training them? What is this training for? If I'm training them to become professional beginning teachers, then I need a framework on how to assess them. And the PPST, the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers, could be a good reference for that. So we have that in our book in assessment, and I'm showing it here. If you again have access to a QR enabled gadget, then you can click this QR code and you could see our sample. But if you want to have a look at it, we can have a, well, I think I am, I could not see my mouse. But anyway, if you have, you could access it, including this tiny URL here. You could see how it looks like. Ayun, I saw my mouse already. Okay, so let's try. So this is what it contains. It tells how I intend to assess my students. So there's a rubric in it. I have an example of how to do it. When they come up with their portfolio, they have to decide on what evidence they could show to speak of the attainment of the competency. And again, very important to me is that they annotate. They have to explain what this evidence tells. Because if they don't explain, then it would be difficult for me as an assessor to understand what they are trying to convey with this evidence. So we have to train them on how to annotate. It's like a reflection of the value of the evidence that they keep in their portfolio. And then they have to justify this after. Okay. Now, I want you to see here, for example, if you tried that, oops. Okay. So again, using forms, I'm using MS Forms here. I cannot find again my mouse. Okay. Anyway, I could not find. If I could access this link here, you would again see the responses, just like what I showed earlier on. I actually wanted to demonstrate it, but I could not see my mouse. Where is it? Okay, I cannot see it. But this is the evolution. I call it evolution because I've been doing it for 2 decades, I said. And this is how I started it, paper-based, and some would even prepare a portfolio in the form of a cabinet. Bakit kaya? Well, if that's the choice of the student, we just have to respect it. And when you ask a person why he would or she would opt for a cabinet like this one, you can see at the top. I hope you can see. I cannot point it using my mouse. Well, the explanation is because they want a container that could contain everything, that one has done in a course or in several courses or in a year or in several years. So that's like life, the situation that we are into in real life. Okay, let's move on. Which of the following do you agree with after seeing those examples of a portfolio? Which of these do you agree with about portfolio assessment? Again, in anticipation of the possibility that not all my students have access to online forms, I have to prepare a paper form assessment. So if this is in paper, the students will just click, do I agree? They put a tick in the box that they agree with. If not, they can just leave it. Okay. But again, the option there is you can make a form. So it would be easy. Okay. Unfortunately, I cannot click it, but I hope you could scan it and you could see what is in it. My mouse is missing. I hope I could click it. I could just click it, but I cannot see it. But anyway, the intention there is I give you options. If you want the paper form, then do it. Because my understanding there is you don't have access to internet connection where you could access the form. So I give you options. Now, for all details and other information that we want to share with you, again, we have a book where we wrote our ideas, and most of the authors here are from PEMEA, the officers of PEMEA. And we would like to share this with you. Just for emphasis, in our book, we talk about portfolio assessment here too, and we provide a rubric for the portfolio assessment. But if you notice in the outline, we don't promote only one because there is no perfect assessment, as I said a while ago. It's really an ideal assessment is the combination of imperfect approaches. So use all appropriate and imperfect assessment to make your assessment more sound and valid. Okay. So again, in the interest of time, I will just refer you to whatever resource that we can offer you. But we can also listen to your voices when I get to see the chat box for me to respond to your questions. So I'm emphasizing here, when you do portfolio assessment, that should be made clear at the start. You have to set your desired learning outcome that would really allow for it. Like in the case of my example in assessment in learning 1, it says here, show knowledge, skills, and desirable attitudes and values. How will you show this? You need a concrete evidence of what you know and are capable of doing. And so portfolio assessment could work there. And I'm not saying it should only be that, because even if I say portfolio assessment is very encompassing, that it could cover knowledge, reasoning, product skills, and affect, it is still imperfect. It has still its imperfections. And so validate information you gather from this by using other approaches. And here is my example. Of course, this is just an example. I'm showing here, take the exam, give assessment in written form to add more reflective journals, for example, for product, a performance-based assessment product type, and e-portfolio if possible. But if it's not possible, then it can be paper-based portfolio. And again, once you said that this is an approach you will be doing, your rubric should be ready too. And I'm showing here the importance of rubric in assessing students' evidence in their portfolio, and the need for annotation, where they explain what the evidence tells about them. Okay, so this is just an example, as I said. Now, of course, if it is not, you don't have access to a paid LMS like Schoology, because that's managed by Rex, well, you can consider other LMS. But this is the problem in free LMS. It's not very complete, like what I said a while ago in the LMS that I discovered, which is favorable for my purpose. everything is inside the website, in the platform. You don't have to go out again from the platform and create other things in other platforms. So this is just an example that, if we go for free LMS, things are in different places, and that could be very problematic on your part as a teacher. Now, if you want to know more about what student-centered assessment is, then you can take this short test that I prepared. It's, again, a 5-item test which I created using online forms, and unfortunately, I did not show anymore an example of this in paper format. But that's the message that I want to convey here all the time. If we go for flexible learning, we have to be ready with all forms of assessment possible, considering the resources of our students and all the constraints that they might have, okay, in their learning. So that's it. Thank you so much for your listening. So we now move on to the next part.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Marilyn Balagtas, for that very enriching and comprehensive presentation and sharing. So at this point in time, may I turn you over to our endearing secretary, Dr. Violeta Valladolid, who will moderate the Q&A portion. Take it away now. Doc Viol, are you there?
Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Belen. Now, we will be presenting to our speakers some of the questions that have been written by the participants in the Q&A box. However, it seems like that we lack time already, plus maybe we can accommodate 3 to 4 questions. Those speakers and some backdoor people have already answered some of your questions. Please check the published Q&A. Okay. We're sorry to inform you that I think Doc Chia has left already because he has another meeting at 1 o'clock. So, but anyway, we would like to raise questions to maybe Doc Marlene.
Okay, Doc.
Marlene.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
Okay, Doc Marlene. So there's one question on what do you think are the best principles in doing assessments for flexible learning? Now we're talking about principles here already.
Okay, as I said a while ago, whatever modality is that you're using, those principles stay as is. You need to ensure validity. Of course, I started with purpose-driven. You should know what your targets are. Okay, so it could be affect, behavior, or cognition, or I said 5, knowledge, reasoning, skills, product, or affect. So that should be clear at the very start. Okay, and then validity, the appropriateness of the tool you are using to measure the target that you have set. And all the rest, even when we talk of flexibility, because we talk of flexible learning, I think we have to be very conscious of the principle on fairness. Okay, can I demonstrate my ability given my resources? So that's a very important principle we have to bear in mind. The inclusivity of our assessment, that it could be presented by the students considering the resources that they have and in anticipation also of their constraints. So like what I explained a while ago, if the students don't have internet connection, why compel them to submit e-portfolio? If they have other options, and these options could still speak of the targets that you have set or that you have developed in them, then that should be acceptable. So I go for of us following all the principles, and as I said a while ago, the more principles you accommodate in your assessment practice, the more student-centered you are. So I don't want to endorse one because I believe that they are all equally valued and guiding principles, to make sure that our assessment is effective and efficient and sound.
Okay, thank you, Doc Marlene. Now there's
Yes.
another question like Okay, I think this question has been asked a lot of times. I think you have also answered this, but I think I still have to mention this. No, how would we be able to avoid cheating in a flexible learning scenario? What strategies can we use to monitor student-centered assessment online?
Well, yeah, that's really a recurring question, and I would give the same answer that I have been giving to people who ask the same question. So, even when it is face to face, the idea, that possibility of cheating is there if we don't trust the student. So, what can be done in online assessment, for example? There are a lot of ways to do that. If it's a test that you're giving, you can shuffle the options. So it's not going to be fixed like that of a paper form. No, there is a fixed place for A, B, C, D. If there is a possibility for you to shuffle the options, do it. Then shuffle the items. So that is one way, so that they won't compare or see the same forms. Now, when we talk of home-based assessment, for example, and it is online, again, the element of cheating is still there. That's a possibility that we have to accept. So how do we minimize cheating if we cannot totally eliminate it? In my way of doing it, as I said, I've been doing online assessment for more than 2 decades. I give an honesty form. I ask my students to sign an honesty form, and I ask somebody else. Well, because I trained adults, I just rely on their honesty form. They sign it when they submit their test to me. And then if I think of now the basic education learners, the grade schoolers, how will I do this? Probably it's not enough to just let them sign the honesty form. Maybe we could ask the parents to attest that this child was the one who answered the test, and not other people in the house. So that's one way of doing it. And again, make some or assess the students in other forms. Don't just rely on one form, because we know even if we say they did this honestly, there is no such single test that captures all what you aim to develop in a child or in a learner. So add more to assessing assessing via test, for example, by giving performance-based or portfolio assessment. That's how they could complement one another. And that is how we could rely on the data that we gather from different approaches and tools that we are using.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline. Actually, there are questions that I tried to collate. No, so like, how do you assess students' learning, for example, for technical subjects, for laboratory classes, and for PE classes and technical vocational subjects in an online environment?
Um, I think the focus of Dr. Cha a while ago somehow answers the question, because in his example, diba, what did he show in his example? The child did the work at home, and then they videoed the work, and then that was sent to the teacher. But of course, prior to the performance of the task, there is a guide, there is a rubric that was sent by the school as a guide of the learner and people witnessing the performance of this learner when they prepare themselves for assessment. So the work could be done at home or anywhere, even in our workplace. We can do the assessment anywhere where they are appropriate, no? But then we need to again define what we are assessing and make sure the tool in assessing it is ready and made public for the consumption, not only of the teacher, but also the learner and the people supporting that learner at home or wherever that is. Okay, so for example, technical, well, it can be done at home, but you have to video it if that is an evidence that I want to see in you. And then send it if you can send it online. If not, then courier it. Video if it's heavy, okay. Take a video of it, then send it to me. So that's one way of doing it. At this time that we cannot report to school and do assessment face to face all the time. So that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you. There's also a question about peer assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do peer assessment in flexible learning?
Yes, why not? Yes, again. So the rule there is first, if I engage my peer or student's peer in the assessment, I have to ask why. Is the learner, the classmate, for example, capable of assessing what I have done when he or she has not witnessed what I did? So probably you have to go back to that. Is this person credible to assess? In the classroom, probably when peers could see how you perform, they could contribute, they could partake in the assessment. But if it is home based, can I ask the students to assess a work that is done individually unless the delivery of instruction was also done collaboratively? So let's say you assign works that have to be done by group, and they work online, like using platform like this one. They can talk to one another, no, either in their social media or whatever way of communicating with one another. If they have been part in the work and they have witnessed the contribution of every member in the work, then they could have a say in the assessment. And in fact, at times you could even assign heavier weight to peer assessment because the members of the teams are the witnesses to how one performs or what one has actually contributed in the work, no, that has been done. And the teacher sometimes could just act in or come in the picture to look at the output. But in terms of the process or how the group has done the work, the teacher could not be a credible assessor for that because the teacher was not there in the process of doing the work. But if it's the product that the teacher assesses or evaluates, then that is where we could say the teacher is credible. So we really need to define what the parameters are in assessing and find out who the right person is that could participate in the assessment of work. It could be the self, it could be the parent, it could be the members of the family, the siblings, who are witnesses to how one performs the job with or without others.
Okay. I guess we don't have time, but I can accommodate two more questions. Is it okay with you,
Yes,
Dr.
yes, po.
Okay,
Okay.
so I think the next question will be on grading of students. So the
Mhm.
question is, how do we grade students? Do you think we can still use traditional grading system for online distance learning? What would you be your recommendation grading system for online environment?
Well, preferably, I would go for criterion reference. You define what your targets are and what could speak of the attainment of these targets, and then look at the evidence. Are they enough to say that one has attained what has been targeted? So parang I want to do away with numerical grading, and we could just say probably one has reached the criterion or met the standard or beyond the standard or nearing the standard. Ganun lang, hindi yung masyadong numerical na it could range from 0 to 100. So more on meeting or not meeting the standard that has been set for, well, that's my preference. Okay, to do away with a lot of, especially the idea, the problem on cheating, to minimize that, then probably we could just train our students to producing evidence that could speak of the learning that we have set and the quality of learning that we have set. And that's what we mean there by setting your standards. And it should be known at the start and agreed upon as acceptable and doable by all.
Okay, thank you. The last question is this, no? Our participants they really appreciate your discussions, you and Dr. Cha, no? In terms of the concepts, processes, and background knowledge of assessment. But I think they want to know about the practical application of these concepts as we go online in our teaching come the new academic year. So I think it's how do they design the assessment in flexible learning.
Yes. So it's more on, the issue is on practical
Application of
application.
these concepts. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I would always, well, tell myself, if I were in their same shoes, I would always tell myself what is possible given my condition, given my situation. So it's still going back to what you have said as essential. You can do away with the non-essential ones. If they add more to what you believe in as essential or agreed upon as essential, then that's fine. But again, whatever they could afford to provide without necessarily ignoring the standards that you have set. And again, these standards should be true to all. Pwede pong ganun eh, no? Like in the case of portfolio assessment, if my packaging is not so technical, just like techie, just like how the others did it, that's fine. What do you actually value here? Is it more on the packaging or the content of it? So you have to really set what is valuable to you, what is essential to you, and all the rest, if they are added, even if they are not your intents, then they could be acknowledged as well.
Yeah, can I add? I think one considerations for teachers is to collaborate with one another. Okay, you remember that I emphasize on leveraging with your community. Okay, like science, math, and probably TLE teachers can work together. They can come out with a quite complicated performance assessment that would more or less that would, so it could be one single performance assessment that would answer different knowledge and skills that can be measured. So you can ask, develop a computer, for example, or develop a new computer, like, that requires science knowledge, science information, calculations, as well as structure or design. And so teachers can collaborate so that, students will not be burdened with so much, so many projects for each subject, but rather one project that it will be able to assess the knowledge skills in several subjects. So that could be one practical application of performance-based assessment. So you need to collaborate with your teachers. So if you ask your student, and you can also do one of the questions that was asked is, can PBA be done as a group work? Yes, and this is where, again, the important role of parents, because in a flexible learning environment and an online learning environment, parents should not be isolated. Okay, this is the time that, in our group, for example, we have a Viber group, okay, or we have a WhatsApp group in the international school, wherein, we ask each one, like, did your son do this? Do you have do you know that you have assignment like this? And so parents are informed, and then that is what we are asking, that parents should really be engaged.
Okay, thank you, Doc Cha. Can you still answer? Can you still accommodate questions, Doc Cha? One question, maybe, or you're
I'm okay.
one question. Okay. There's a question, Cha. Which of the two PBA, the process or product, should be used as the basis for rating students' performance in an online environment? So he's talking here about process versus product PBA.
What? Sorry, I didn't hear clearly the question, Doc.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which of the two PBA, the process or product, should be used as the best basis for rating students' performance in an online environment? Who's talking about here the process,
I
performance,
go
and
for
the
both.
product?
I go for both, but the weight could vary.
Okay.
Okay, so again, you go. What is more valuable to you? Is it just the product? If you are in doubt as to who did the product, then you have to look at the process as well. So that's how to verify the authenticity of the work. So I go for the combination. I really go for balance. Remember the principle of balance?
Yes.
So there is no such thing as perfect. So use all the imperfect ways of assessing learning to
Yeah.
approximate the true person, no? The person that you are assessing, the true knowledge. Well, there is no such thing as perfect. As I said, we are just approximating, no? What is the true person, what that person is capable of doing in life. So as to the way that could vary, that depends on probably the nature of the work.
Okay. Yeah, and also like the targets, the learning outcomes that you really want to see. What do you really want to know? Which area of your unit of study you want your student to show in terms of competency or proficiency. Again, yes, I agree with the balancing, and this is where the creativity of teachers will come in. Okay, if you like, I don't know, like it does not have to be 50-50. It could be 60-40 process performance. In fact, one of the questions that I answered online um, is there a conflict between product and process? In fact, there are performance tasks that would require both process as well as product. And and what makes a difference would be in setting up your criteria and developing your rubrics, because in rubrics you can both develop a rubric that both assess both product and process.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we already went over time. So what we can do is just we will collate all the other questions sent to us by the participants, and then we will send all these questions to the speakers. Then we will try to come up with the FAQs in the PEMEA website with the answers of the speakers. So you can check out the PEMEA website in the coming days, okay, if the FAQs are there already, okay? So thank you so much, Dr. Cha and Dr. Marlene. Now, I would like to call on Dr. Nikli Tira-Tira, a PEMEA board member, for the synthesis and closing remarks. Dr. Nikli?
Yes, I guess it's good afternoon to everyone. As a synthesis, Dr. Balagtas said that we should know our resources to determine our instructional design. Teachers should understand and identify where the students' level of maturity and the kind of learning. Learner-centered is in the middle of a continuum of being teacher-reliant and making students self-reliant. Dr. Balagtas also mentioned that the rule for assessment is constructive assessment. That is aligning curriculum, instruction, and assessment. She also discussed the teacher should know the new competencies. She conceptualized the route for teaching and learning. She said that the route the teacher should choose must be on the design of learning approach and assessment. In her presentation, she also mentioned different platforms of the different learning approaches and assessment routes. She said teachers should design differentiated instruction in a flexible modalities, assess the learners based on grade level standards. After the assessment, teachers should determine to bridge the gaps of student learning. In deciding our instructional design, it is important to know the what, when, who, and how do we assess our students' performance in the use of flexible modalities. Second presentation, she discussed portfolio assessment, which is an example of authentic assessment. Portfolio process includes set of goal, collect, select, organize, reflect, evaluate, compare student work or output. The heart of portfolio is students' reflection. We should not forget our feedback. At the end, she emphasized that teachers should be clear with their targets and purposes in designing student-centered assessment in flexible hand, talk on the potentials of performance-based assessment in flexible learning environment. He shared the current situation in our educational system. The dilemmas in assessment was given. He clarified definition of student-centered learning, student-centered assessment, flexible learning, performance, performance-based learning, and performance-based assessment. Teacher student-centered assessment in flexible learning was given, such as it is individualized and should focus on student learning and growth. Design student-centered assessment, which includes formulation of learning outcomes, development creation of learning experiences, and discussion of assessment results. So designing involves planning, doing, checking, and acting on it, and goes on a continuous cycle. Moreover, he discussed the framework of assessment approaches and the methods. Performance-based assessment looks into students completing a task and looks into higher order thinking skills, application of students' learning, and values of student work progress. Performance-based assessment needs rubrics to assess students' learning. Product-oriented performance-based assessment is the actual task and results of student tasks. Steps in conducting the performance-based assessment includes defining your purpose, performance, rubrics, and assessing that performance. Performance-based assessment must have a clear performance task. He emphasized the importance of rubric development in the performance-based task. For PBA to be successful, you need to have a template and rubric, benchmark examples, and help students prepare and practice and leverage with your community. He showed us different samples of performance-based tasks and how it was assessed. Lastly, he ended his talk by stating that parents play a big role in children's learning. As teacher, he said we need to ensure that we have engagement, personalization, relevance, and we need to be challenged in our new normal learning. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go with how to be a member of PEMEA. For us to be a member of PEMEA, we need to go into the PEMEA website, www.pemea.org. We have different kinds of membership. We have affiliate, professional, and institutional. You can see on the slide the educational qualifications and the membership fees. What are the benefits of being a member? You're going to be a member of our professional organization. In seminar workshop activities, and online subscription to newsletter, website, and other digital learning resources. We have also, the membership process would include completely filling out our membership form, and then you submit and accomplish that membership form, submit it via email with the address pemea@secretariat@gmail.com. The membership committee will review the application. Once approved, payment details already are the details. You have the bank, the account number, and the branch address. You can submit the scanned deposit slip and the application form again through email. Okay. So I guess that would be all for today. As a closing remark, let me say thank you for sharing your time with us. And we are positive that you have learned a lot from Dr. Balagtas and Dr. Richard Gonzalez talk. Congratulations to the board member of PEMEA. Have a great time throughout the rest of the day, and bye-bye to everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Thank
Have
you,
a nice
Doc.
day. Have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.